Welcome again to the online Dublin Buddhist Centre, and my name's Nyanadara, and I'll be with you teaching this course for the next 5 weeks. And the title of the course is called Wise Up, Destroy Hatred, Free Your Mind. So I'll say a little bit more about why it's called that in a moment. What we're going to do this evening is I'll talk for a little while about the course and what's going to happen on the course. So there'll be an introduction to what we're going to be doing. And then we'll have an opportunity to introduce ourselves in breakout rooms. So that'll be a characteristic of each evening. There'll be breakout rooms. Again, I'll say more about that in a moment. And then we'll have a 10-minute break. So every night, because we're going to be on Zoom for 2 hours, we'll make sure that there's a 10-minute break so everyone can have a break from looking at the screen and do whatever you need to do to refresh yourself. And then we'll begin to explore the content of the course itself, and we'll also do some meditation. And the evening will finish with setting up our practice for the coming week. So a lot of this course will happen at home. It'll be a matter of you taking what you've learned and applying it in your life at home. So that's the basic plan for the evening. And I wanted to start actually where a lot of expositions of Buddhism often do start, and that's with what are known as the Four Truths, or sometimes they're called the Four Noble Truths. And in a way, what these indicate is just four things which are true about life. This is the way the Buddha saw things, and this is how he communicated it. So the first thing he said is that there is an inescapable element of our life which is unsatisfactory. There's elements of our life which are just not okay. And no matter how hard we try, we don't seem to be able to make them okay. And that's very often something that drives us to explore new things, to learn new things, to try and improve our life so we can relieve ourselves from that sense of unsatisfactoriness. So that sense of discontent actually just seems to be true. It just seems to be an aspect of human life, an unavoidable aspect of human life. And in a way, Buddhism starts there. It just starts by acknowledging, yeah, that's actually the case. There's a sense of unsatisfactoriness, a sense of restlessness in my soul, as it were, and I want to do something about it. So that's the first of these four truths. And then the second truth is that feeling that we have, that feeling of unsatisfactoriness, of frustration, etc., has a cause. And according to the Buddha's teaching, that cause is craving. It's actually produced by a mental state. So that, in a way, when he said that 2,500 years ago, it was quite radical to locate the source of unsatisfactoriness in life from a mental state, from a state of mind. And that was one of the radical things about the Buddha's teaching. And one way we can understand that is that it's kind of a sense of selfishness. So a craving of wanting things to be a particular way for us without reference to other people. And we'll see during the course of this course how that's a problem and how we can begin to overcome that, which is what Buddhism is really all about. So that's the second truth. The Buddha's basically saying, yes, there is unsatisfactoriness in life. It's not the whole picture. We do experience happiness as well, but there is this unavoidable, it would seem, aspect of unsatisfactoriness, and that has a cause. And the third truth, of course, is the truth that there is the possibility of freedom from that unsatisfactoriness. So there is actually a state, a human state, which is free from suffering, which is free from unsatisfactoriness. And that is the state of a Buddha. That's the state that the Buddha himself enjoyed. And there's various different ways we can describe that. We can describe that as a state of awakening, an awakened state. We can describe that as a state of enlightenment. We can describe that as nibbana, which means something like calming or of conflict or strife in the mind. So that really is the goal of Buddhism, and we'll hear more about the goal in the second part of this evening. The Buddha also, and this is the fourth truth, talked about a path. He talked about a path that leads from a state of suffering to a state of freedom from suffering. And there's various different expositions of the path in the Buddhist tradition. One of the most famous is the Eightfold Path. So the Buddha pointed out a path with 8 different aspects. And if we practice those aspects, we begin to free ourselves. And ultimately, we attain that state of freedom ourselves. So those are the 4 noble truths. And what they refer to is actual both experiences that we have and experiences and practices that we could have or that we could engage in. So it's like the 4 truths are pointing out the possibilities inherent in our lives as human beings. So like I said, the Buddha talked about different expositions of the path. And what we're going to be looking at is one particular, quite condensed exposition of the path. It's called the Metta Sutta. And it highlights a threefold path, a path with 3 different aspects. And that's where the title of the course comes from. So the 3 different aspects of the path are, first of all, ethics, secondly, meditation, and thirdly, wisdom. And so the wise up bit relates to ethics, the destroy hatred bit refers to meditation, and the free your mind bit refers to wisdom. So we're going to be looking at this text called the Metta Sutta. It's a very ancient Buddhist text. So you might be aware that when the Buddha communicated, people remembered what he said. And they used it as a kind of reference point in their own lives and their own practice. And they committed it to memory and they remembered it, then they passed it on for hundreds of years. So that the Buddhist tradition was a completely oral tradition for several hundred years. And after a while, these words of the Buddha got written down. And they were called suttas. You might be more familiar with another form of that word, which is sutra. And that means something like a thread. And it's basically a discourse. So it might be a conversation, or it might just be a talk that the Buddha gave on a particular occasion to a particular group of people, and that was remembered. And the subject of this particular sutta was metta. And significantly, this comes down to us in a poetic form. So because the tradition was an oral tradition, people often would put the Buddha's teachings into verse, presumably so it makes it easier to remember. So this sutta, this discourse that we're going to be basing this course on, is a poem, really. If you read it in the original language, you can hear the music of the poetry. And it's in, relatively strict verse, I gather. And there's 10 of these verses. You'll notice in the book that you might have got that goes along with the course that 2 of the verses are joined together. So it looks like there's only 9, but in the original language, which is called Pali, there's actually 10. So that brings me to the book. So hopefully you've managed to get hold of a copy of Living with Kindness from Windhorse Publications. And that book is based on a seminar on this same Metta Sutta that was given by a Buddhist teacher called Sangharakshita in 1978 in a place in East Anglia in England. So in a way, the book itself is the record of a conversation between Sangharakshita and a number of people, probably about 10 or 12 people. I'm not exactly sure how many there were, but there would have been a relatively small number of people. And the book, originally that seminar was recorded and transcribed, and then a few people got together and edited it into a book. So in a way, like I say, it's kind of like an oral tradition, the book itself. And it's a relatively short book. It's about 150 pages, and because it's conversational, it's a relatively straightforward read. It's relatively kind of plain language. So each week on the course, we'll be basing what we say, or what I say, will be based on the content of the book. I'm hoping to kind of bring the text alive in the course of the evenings. But it'd be really, really worthwhile for you to read the corresponding passages in the book, and I'll let you know by email what the reading is for that particular week. So basically the book is, I've divided the book up into 5 sections corresponding to the 5 weeks of the course, and like I say, I'll let you know what they are. And it'll be about 20, 30 or 40 pages to read each week. So hopefully that'll feel manageable, because I know not everybody is a reader, but even if you're not a reader, hopefully that won't be too onerous, and you'll actually enjoy it, hopefully. So like I say, if you haven't got a chance to get hold of the book, I'd really recommend that you get hold of it. It'll really add a whole level of richness to the course. So I keep using this word metta, and metta is a Pali word. So Pali is a language that a number of the Buddha's teachings were written down in. There's a huge, great big collection of works called the Pali Canon, which is really quite vast, and this Metta Sutta is part of that canon. So that's the language Pali that this word metta and also the word sutta come from. And what we'll be doing during the course of this 5-week course is sometimes we'll be unpicking what these words mean, what these ancient Indian words mean. And sometimes we leave them untranslated because it's quite difficult to find an adequate translation for the term metta. So that's what we're going to be literally translating words from one language into another. But what I hope on the course will also be doing is translating these words and these ideas into our actual lives, into action. So this really is what the Buddhist teaching is for. It's not just to sort of titillate our intellect, but to actually enable a transformation of the way that we are and what we do. So hopefully there'll be a translation as not just from one language to another, but a translation from language and thought into life and action. So because metta is such a central focus of the course, I thought I'd just say a few words about what it means, what this word metta means. Metta being, of course, the subject of this sutta. So metta means friendliness. It means loving kindness. You could say it's a down-to-earth care and concern directed to all living beings equally, individually, and without reservation. So one of the signs of metta is that you are genuinely and deeply concerned for the well-being, happiness, and prosperity of the object of your metta, which might be another person, it might be an animal, but a living being of some kind. You actually are genuinely, deeply concerned for their welfare. You have an enthusiasm for their growth and their progress in their life. So while the word is connected with the word for friendship, it doesn't necessarily need to be expressed as friendship. It can just remain as an emotion. However, if 2 people have metta, that friendship will take on a new kind of dimension of meaning. And the reason for that is metta, this fellow feeling, which we'll hear more about later, removes a sense of self-interest. So when you're so absorbed in the well-being of another, you tend to just lose your self-reference. It's not that you stop caring about yourself, but you lose that sense of everything needing to be about you. That's that craving I mentioned at the beginning. And we let go of that. And that, according to the Buddhist tradition, is a liberation of the heart. So what we're trying to do is connect with that sense of friendliness and raise it to a higher pitch of intensity. So so part of the reason I'm saying this is to give the impression, hopefully, that metta is something dynamic. It's an active thing. It's an emotional response. It's a volition. It's an attitude. It's not a feeling in the sense of something being pleasant or painful. It's something dynamic. And one of the hallmarks of metta is that you want to act on it. Metta will find practical expression in the way that you're with other people. So yeah, again, this will come out during the course of the 5 weeks, I'm sure. So I want to give you a little quote, actually from another Buddhist sutta, and this gives you some sense of the kind of the quality of metta. So this is what the Buddha says in this particular teaching. Just as in the pre-dawn darkness, the morning star shines, blazes, and dazzles, even so, all the grounds for making merit do not equal 1/16 of the heart release through metta. Metta, surpassing them, shines, blazes, and flashes forth. So the Buddha likens metta to like various celestial bodies like the moon and the sun, the morning star. And he's saying that it shines, metta shines, blazes, and flashes forth. So what the Buddha is trying to communicate is that metta is not something lukewarm. And one of the difficulties that one comes across with language is that it's really difficult to convey the power of positive emotions, of what you could call, for want of a better word, spiritual emotions. They tend to sound rather kind of tepid, rather lukewarm, or rather weak. Even the word friendliness doesn't have a strong connotation. So in this other, that's why I'm bringing this other thing in, that the Buddha says metta shines and blazes, like it burns. So it's something incandescent. It's even sometimes talked about something ecstatic or even blissful. So it's a complete transformation of our usual emotional habits. And I'll just say a couple more things about metta, and then I'll say some general things about the course. So metta is sometimes talked about as a rational emotion. So as we know, often our emotions are irrational. We notice that we're getting worked up about something in a way that's disproportionate or exaggerated compared to the actual event that we're experiencing or what we're seeing. So in the book, Sangha actually gives the example of a spider. So someone having a very, very strong response of fear to an insect, or I suppose it's more correctly an arachnid, which is not actually harmful, but we have this response. Maybe something a little bit more. I just noticed today, I ordered a coffee and a croissant, and it was kind of cold. I was sitting outside, and I noticed that, what happened was the coffee arrived, and there was quite a long delay before the croissant arrived. Now, I was kind of hoping I'd get them at the same time. And what I noticed was a tendency to get irritated about that. And as well, I noticed to just realize how ridiculous that was, to get upset about a coffee and a croissant. But I could feel that tendency in my mind. So what we're trying to do with metta is to try and find emotional responses which are more appropriate and more adequate to what's actually going on around us. So you could say that metta is a rational response to meeting another person. Rational in the sense of it references the objective fact that the other person actually exists, that their experience is real. So in a way, it's a very down-to-earth kind of human-heartedness, a very down-to-earth realization that other people are real. You could put it like that. So metta, in terms of this particular sutta, part of the reason I'm going on about it a bit is that metta is the kind of key idea and the key practice in this particular exposition of the Buddhist path, this short 10-verse sutta. It kind of underpins the whole path. And according to this teaching, metta this quality of love and kindness or friendliness can take you the whole way. It can take you to freedom, it can take you to awakening, it can take you to enlightenment. So we're not just going to be talking about metta, you might be relieved to hear. We're actually going to be practicing it as well. So part of what we're going to be doing on this course is learning a practice called Metta Bhavana, which is a 5-stage practice. Some of you will be familiar with it, where you systematically and progressively cultivate this quality that I've just been describing. So it becomes something lived rather than just a nice idea, because it is a nice idea. Having a heart imbued with love is a lovely idea, but so often we have the idea, but the reality is not there. So we're going to be actually learning how to develop it in our own mind and our own heart during the course of the 5 weeks. So what I wanted to do now is just actually give you a little bit more of a sense of how we're going to do that. So what we're going to be covering on each of the 5 weeks. So the first week is basically, well, this week is called the Way of Metta, and that corresponds to the intro and chapter 1 of the book. And we're just going to be looking at the first verse, the first sentence actually of the sutta, and we'll be looking at the first stage of this 5-stage practice, the Metta Bhavana. And we're going to be looking at metta for ourselves. And then in the second week, we're going to be looking at the ethical foundations of metta. So this is the ethics bit, this is the wise up bit, and that corresponds with chapter 2 of the book. And in this next week, we're going to be looking at the second stage of the Metta Bhavana, which is the stage where we bring to mind and cultivate metta towards a good friend. Week 3 of the course is just called Cultivating Metta, which goes in quite a bit of depth into the meditation practice itself. So that's the meditation bit, the destroy hatred bit. And what we're going to be looking at is the third stage of the Metta Bhavana, which is the stage of the neutral person. So we cultivate metta towards someone who we don't have a strong feeling for. The fourth week is called the culmination of metta. So that corresponds to chapter 4 of the book. And in this week, we're going to look at developing this attitude of love and kindness towards an enemy or towards someone that is difficult. So this really is about destroying hatred. It's about removing that thorn of aversion from our heart. And fifthly, the last week is called the realization of metta. That corresponds to the last section of the book, which is called the conclusion. And this is about developing metta for all beings. And this is about wisdom. It's about freeing the mind through a profound shift in the way that we perceive the world in which we live in. A profound shift in the way that we understand who we are, and a profound shift in the way that we understand who other people are. So that's just to give you a bit of an overview of how we're going to approach the course and how we're going to, week by week, explore these different stages and the significance of the different stages of the practice. And the course, the emphasis is very much on the home practice. So in a way, the course kind of happens outside of these Tuesday night sessions as much as it happens inside them. So what we'll be doing is we'll be setting intentions each evening, and then the following week we'll be reviewing how we got on with them, particularly in the breakout rooms, which I'll describe next. And there'll be a couple of things to practice. One, there'll be a meditation element to practice, and there'll be one other thing to practice, and also the reading to do. So like I said a few times now, we're going to have breakout rooms. We'll do those next after I stop talking. And there'll be, about, let's see how many people are with us already. There's 34, so there'll be about 5 or 6 people in each group. And there's a team, so you'll notice that some of the people who are here on the Zoom room have got team written on their name. So they will be leading other groups. So they're people who've got more experience of Metta Bhavana. And we'll just lightly facilitate the groups so everyone knows what's going on and so on. Every week, we'll video the class, and What that means is that if you miss a class, you can catch up on it. But it also means that the meditations that I lead during the course of the evening, you'll be able to follow at home. So again, it'll be a progressive introduction to meditation and to the Metta Bhavana, and you'll be able to follow those lead throughs at home as a way of just reinforcing what we've learnt in the class. And there might also be, in the email that I'll send out tomorrow, there'll also be maybe some other material which might be of some interest to some of you. But yeah, there'll be more information about that tomorrow. One last little point is just about Zoom. Probably everybody knows about Zoom at this point in time, but if your connection is bad, if your bandwidth is low, if you turn your video off, it can make a big difference in terms of the quality of your sound. Actually, only last night I was on a Zoom call with somebody who was connecting from Spain on his mobile phone, and I couldn't really hear him, but when he turned his video off, I could hear him very clearly. So that's just something to be aware of. So what we'll do now is we'll go into home groups, breakout groups, and it'll be a chance to meet some of the other people on the course. And the groups will be the same each week. So the idea is that we just go and get to know each other a bit. It's more difficult in an online context to get to know other people, but surprisingly, you can get quite a strong sense of people in an online context. Yeah, we'll do that in just a moment. I've just got a few questions. I mean, in a way, you can say anything that you feel is relevant, but I've just got a few questions. You might like to say your name. And then why did you come on this course? Like what appealed to you? What interested you about the course? And also what would be helpful to know is what experience you have of Buddhism and meditation. So the course is geared towards anybody. So it's geared towards people who, and this is their first time exploring meditation or Buddhism, or it might be somebody who's done quite a bit of study of Buddhism and wants to go into this particular area of the Buddha's teaching. So yeah, if you could just say what your experience is of Buddhism and meditation. And thirdly, what do you think the challenges might be? You might be aware of challenges, and you might also be aware of opportunities. So I'll post those in the chat box in just a sec. I'll just pop that in the chat now. So that's just to give you a reference if you need it. Oh, and I see Amy's posted the information about the book there in the chat as well. If you want to click on that, you could always click on it and look it up later on. And that reminds me, actually, I should have introduced Amy. So Amy's going to be, you'll see her there on the screen. She's going to be doing the tech support for the 5 weeks. So thanks, Amy. Right. So basically what we'll do is we'll go into the groups now. And what you need to do is you need to remember which group you're in. So Amy's going to put us into groups this week, but to make it easier in subsequent weeks, you'll need to remember who the group leader is. So you can either remember their name, or they'll also have a colour. So for example, there's Billy pink and Maeve yellow. So you can just remember either the person's name or the colour, and then that way you'll be able to find your way into the group next week. And yeah, I think that's it. So Amy's going to give us a heads up when we're halfway through. But other than that, we'll see you in about 20 minutes back in this room here. Just got one question from one of the groups, which is, how is Metta about how Metta is not or is like prayer. So of course that depends on what you mean by prayer, but if I've understood the question correctly, I think probably the main difference is that with metta, you're wishing somebody well directly. So you're wishing them well from yourself to themself. You're not appealing to an intermediary in order to help them to be better or help them to prosper or to grow. You're wishing that directly from yourself to them. So that's probably the principal difference. So in other contexts, in other religious traditions, for example, you might pray to God or like an incarnation of God or something in order to make things happen in a particular way for another person. But the Buddhist tradition doesn't understand that things happen the way they happen because of the will of a creator being. The Buddha isn't a creator being of that kind. The Buddha is someone who understands the way things arise, and because of that understanding is able to point out a path to create the conditions for spiritual growth to take place. So we don't pray to him in the sense of, please make things go a particular way for me or for somebody else. So I think that's probably the principal difference. However, there's a commonality probably in as much as you're expressing goodwill towards another person. How you conceive of that will differ, but the basic action of wishing somebody well is what's key. It's not that how you conceive of that is unimportant, as hopefully we'll see as the course goes on. It's actually quite important the way we think about the world that we live in. And actually it's important how we think about the Metta Bhavana, actually. And I think it's really important that we understand that it is an act of an individual. It's us in relation to other people and taking responsibility for the way that we are for the benefit of others. That's really, really key to the Buddhist understanding about what a human being is in relation to other human beings. Were there any other questions? Oh, look, there's a couple there. Oh yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, great. So just a little tip there from Natalie. So are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you have one. All right, that's fine. I'll keep going. So so that first bit of the sutta says, that first verse says, they who are skilled in their good, who wish to attain that state of calm, nibbana, should act thus. Another translation is a little bit more straightforward. It just says, if you know what is truly good for you and understand the possibility of reaching the state of perfect peace, then this is how you need to live. So the sutta, this poem, starts with a glimpse of the goal. So I mentioned at the beginning how Buddhism says that it's true that there's a goal that's worth striving for. There's a goal in human life that's worth striving for. And here it's called a state of calm. So the teaching starts with, as it were, a glimpse of that. We have a glimpse that we ourselves can reach that goal. So it's a little bit like the acorn has a glimpse of the oak, or another metaphor might be that when you're looking at a mountain peak which you intend to climb, you have an intimation of what it might be to stand on that peak and look down. So that's quite important. It's quite important that we recognize that goal is something that we ourselves can attain. It's part of our nature as human beings to be able to make that transition through the practice of the path. So the goal in Buddhism is conceived of in different ways, as I mentioned earlier. There's different ways of talking about it. There's different ways of thinking about it. So it's talked about as awakening sometimes. So the Buddha is known as the awakened one. So it's as if we've woken up from, a nightmare even. We've woken up from a state of fantasy to a state of reality. So we can talk about it like that. We can talk about it as a state of enlightenment. So sometimes the Buddha is described as the enlightened one. So enlightened suggests illumination. So something that was previously obscured, that was previously dark, is illumined. And not just that, but the Buddha is not just, it's not just that a light's going on, it's actually that he radiates light, the light of metta, for example. So the Buddha is the enlightened one. And there's this term, nibbana, which means something like the extinguishing of destructive emotions. So hatred, for example, is the destructive emotion. So nibbana or nirvana, which is probably more familiar to us, is a state where all negative emotions have been blown out. It's like a fire that's died out. What's left is something positive, and what's left is peace. So that's how, in this particular sutta, the goal is conceived of. The goal is conceived of as a state of peace. And that, of course, is in contrast to how we often experience our life, which is a state of conflict. It's quite striking. I mean, we become accustomed to it, but sometimes you just get a sense of just how much conflict there is in human life. You turn on the radio. I just was listening to it this morning, and of course, there's an account of what's going on in Afghanistan. So that's conflict on quite a drastic kind of scale, where people actually are losing their lives through violence. But even just listening to the radio as well about people talking about COVID restrictions in this country, and there's a lot of conflict about that. Some people think it should be done one way, other people think it should be done another way. So there's this goal is a state where that conflict doesn't arise, and it doesn't arrive externally. So we don't have the impulse to get into conflict with another person. But we also, according to the Buddhist tradition, have a kind of an internal peace. So our own mind is in a state of peace. So I think this is really key, that we understand this state of peace as meaning a peace of mind. And that is probably something we all feel. We may or may not be in conflict with other people, but often we feel a conflict within our own mind. We feel, for example, that part of us wants to do one thing and part of us wants to do something else. And we just literally don't know which is the best way. So we feel this constant kind of tug, almost a tug of war between different parts of ourselves, which feel like they're actually in conflict. There's almost like a battle raging in our own mind. So the Buddha is saying that if you have a sense that that state of peace is a possibility for you, then this is how you need to live. This is what you need to do. And again, the Buddhist tradition says that that state of peace is available to us if we practice. That's the big if. And it's very much put in terms of developing a skill. So it's they who are skilled in their good. So it's basically, the connotation here is of developing a skill. It's not so much, Buddhism is not so much a matter of piety or conventional religiosity or even kind of goodness or being a good boy or a good girl, but about developing a skill, a little bit like you might develop a skill in a kind of an ordinary way, like maybe cooking or baking. You develop a skill to cook a particular kind of food, or maybe learn a musical instrument. So Buddhism has this kind of pragmatic emphasis. It's sort of saying, well, okay, if that's what you want, if you want to attain a state of perfect peace, then you need to do certain things. You need to live in a particular way, and then you will attain that. So it's important that we understand who's talking here. So like I said, it's the Buddha who's talking. These are records of the Buddha's words. They're probably not exactly what the Buddha said, but they're probably about as close as we can get, actually. This is a very, very ancient text. And it's sometimes said that the Buddha doesn't speak with an imperative voice. He's not sort of wagging his finger. It's more of a conditional voice. He's sort of saying, well, okay, the way I see it is that if you want to attain a state of peace, I'm basically saying that that's possible. And if you want to do it, there's a particular path that you can tread. Now, I'll explain to you what that is. And if you want to, you can have a go. You can do it. And then what I'm saying is that you'll become more peaceful. Your mind will become more tranquil as you practice. But it's really up to you to do that if you want. So that's the kind of way the Buddha would speak. He would speak in a kind of conditional way. If you want this, then you'll need to do that. He's not saying, and it'll sort of, it's not a voice of authority in the sense of you have to do this because these are the rules that I've laid down. And if you break the rules, you'll be punished. And if you follow the rules, you'll be rewarded. The Buddha doesn't talk in that kind of way. The Buddha just says it's of the nature of the human mind that if you put these principles into practice like metta, your mind will begin to develop. So I think that's quite important that we sort of hear the Buddha in the right kind of way. We hear the Buddha's voice in the right kind of way, and we don't take him to be a kind of an authority figure in the sense of wielding some kind of power over us. So it's interesting that in the Buddha's own day, when people would come and speak to him, sometimes there'd be disagreements, and sometimes people would disagree quite vehemently with the Buddha, and they'd go away having not been persuaded by the Buddha, and the Buddha would just sort of let them go. So, okay, well, if that's the way you see it, that's fine. I don't see it like that. And they would have some quite vigorous debate. I mean, that's the impression you get from reading the texts, the records of these conversations. But the Buddha wouldn't try and force his view on somebody else. Because really, and this just goes, again, right to the heart of what it is to be a human being, is it doesn't really make sense to develop a quality like metta unless you're doing it from your own volition, unless you've decided that it's of value and you want to do it. So that's very much sort of the way the Buddha puts it, if you see what I mean. That's hopefully the way that we're going to be exploring it on this course. Is like, well, this is the Buddha's teaching. This is my understanding of the Buddha's teaching. And if you think it's of value, I'd invite you to have a go at it, and we'll explore what arises, and hopefully questions will arise. And again, I think it's really important that when questions arise, and they will arise, that there's an opportunity to ask them. So usually on the first night of the course, you don't get that many questions. So I was grateful for the question that we did get. But in subsequent evenings, there will be an opportunity, particularly after the break, to ask whatever questions have emerged during the course of your practice over the week, or in response to anything that I've said during the course of the evenings. So I want now to just move into doing a bit of meditation practice, and part of what the Buddha is talking about here is potential. So the Buddha is basically saying you have the potential to grow. You have the potential to grow into a state of peace. You have that seed within you, and if you practice in this kind of way, you will grow that seed. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a bit of meditation, and we're going to focus on developing metta for ourselves. And in a way, we can make this more complicated than it really is. So the fact is that we do feel a state of unease, and we do know that there's something more to life than what we're currently experiencing. If we didn't have that sense, we probably wouldn't have bothered to come to this course, and we wouldn't have stuck it out for the first hour and a half. We would have logged off. Yeah. So we have this sense that there's kind of more to life, that we can become happier and freer, that we can grow. And really what we're doing when we do the first stage of the Metta Bhavana, which is where we cultivate metta for ourselves, we're just in a way giving some attention to that. We're allowing that desire to in a way kind of grow. We're acknowledging our potential and actually taking it seriously that we can realize it. So one of the ways that traditionally we engage with this part of the practice, and this is all that we're going to do this evening, is by saying phrases that express that intention. They express the intention to grow. They express the intention to liberate ourselves. And this is something that I've kind of reflected on a bit myself. It's not any part of any tradition that I've read, it seems that the four phrases that traditionally are used to cultivate metta correspond to the four truths which I mentioned at the beginning of this evening. So when we say, may I be well, that corresponds with the truth of suffering. So in a sense, we're saying, may suffering not arise, particularly in my body. Yeah, so may suffering not arise in my body. So may I be well. May I be physically well. And we all want that. Nobody wants to be unwell, to be sick or injured, to feel bodily pain. And then may I be happy corresponds to the second truth of craving. So a state of craving, a state of hankering, is an unhappy state. There's a restlessness to it. We want something or we want rid of something. So aversion is a kind of craving for something to finish or something to end or someone to leave our life in some way. Yeah? So it's a wanting rid. And it causes a deep sense of distress and agitation. So when we say, may I be happy, in a way, we're wishing or longing for that hankering to dissipate, to become pacified. When we say, may I be free from suffering, we're actually saying something that is quite profound. We often just sort of say it quite glibly, but what you're saying when you say, may I be free from suffering, is you're actually asserting that freedom from suffering is actually possible. So may I be free from suffering. You're saying, I recognize that that's possible. Like the Sutta says, when I understand that the state of perfect peace is a reality for me, and I want to move towards it. So that's what you're saying. So that, of course, corresponds to the third truth, the truth of the ending of suffering, the freedom from suffering, if you like, liberation from suffering, which is equivalent to nirvana, equivalent to awakening, equivalent to enlightenment. So it's quite a thing that you're saying. And fourthly, you say, may I grow and develop. And that, of course, corresponds to the path. In other words, you're saying, may I actually begin to progressively, incrementally, and gradually grow to that state of freedom through my practice, through my effort. So may I be well corresponds to the first truth of suffering. May I be happy corresponds to the second truth of the cause of suffering, which is craving. May I be free from suffering corresponds to the third truth, which is the truth of the possibility of awakening for us. And fourthly, may I grow and develop corresponds to the truth of the path that leads from suffering to freedom from suffering, to awakening. So what we're going to do actually in this meditation is actually say those words. And it occurred to me that probably most of us are sitting in a room on our own. So what I'm going to suggest that if you are sitting in a room on your own, that you say the phrases out loud. We wouldn't normally do this in a meditation class because we tend to be in a group, and it would be a bit of a racket if everybody said that. But I thought it might be interesting to try, seeing as we're all at home, we're all on our own, is to actually say out loud those phrases and just let them kind of resonate. So we're giving voice to our deepest longings and just sitting with that. That's what we're going to do. And we'll just do a little bit of setting up before we do that. So you don't have to sit in a special way. We'll look at meditation posture next week, but I just invite you just to sit comfortably, and in a couple of minutes we'll start this meditation, which will be for about 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. But it won't feel long, don't worry. So if you just sit easy, and remember that meditation, metta, is a natural thing. I'm not going to ask you to do anything unnatural. It's just a matter of incrementally moving from where you are to somewhere else. And paradoxically, we do that just by going more deeply into what's really happening right now. So just having a sense of the place where we are And first of all, just having a sense of the place where we are physically. So where is our body? What's going on around us? What objects are there? So there's probably walls, there's a ceiling of some kind. So just having a sense of our body located in space in relation to other objects. And feeling our body resting on what we're sitting on. So our body is like another object, but strangely it kind of feels like something. So we can't feel the wall. We know that it's there, but with our body, we know that it's there and we can feel it kind of from the inside. So how does your body feel from the inside? For example, the feeling of your feet touching the ground or touching what you're sitting on. What's the feeling of your legs? Your bottom and the weight of your body pressing down through it onto your chair or your cushions. Can you feel the pressure of your belt or waistband against your belly? So with that whole lower part of the body, you'll notice that some bits are hard and some bits are soft. So there's bone and there's flesh and skin. And there's the touch of your skin against your clothing. And your belly. And in the belly, there's not just sensation, there's also movement. So as you breathe, your body moves. So tuning into that movement. And don't worry if you're distracted. Don't worry if your mind keeps hopping on to other subjects or objects or interests. Just try and bring your attention back to your body in a kind way. And then there's the chest. The chest, again in contact with your clothing, and again moving as you breathe. The arms by your sides. So feeling the arms as centers of sensation, temperature, touch, particularly in the hands. Feeling the sensations in the neck and the throat. The scalp, the forehead. So it's a kind of kindly, curious attention that we're bringing to our immediate physical experience. And you might notice a sense of ease, a sense of release that arises with that kindly attention. In the eyes, the cheeks, the mouth. And just having a sense of the whole of your body and all the different sensations that arise with it. Some of them are pleasant, some of them are painful. There might even be a sense of injury or illness, or a sense of well-being and health. And just acknowledging that you prefer very much health and well-being. It's not an idea, it's a deeply held attitude that arises from being embodied. We recoil from pain, we reach for pleasure. We recoil from injury and illness, we want well-being and health. And we say out loud to ourselves, may I be well. And just sitting with the import of that statement, of that intention, and saying it again, may I be well. And then acknowledging the fact that arising with our physical experience is what we can only call the mind, which includes thoughts and emotions. And weirdly, they can be pleasant or painful, afflicted or at peace also. And again, we want, we desire the peaceful ones. We don't like the conflict, the agitation, the dissipation. We like the concentration, the togetherness, the peace. And we give expression to the desire for those things by saying, may I be happy. Again, saying out loud to and for yourself, may I be happy. And because we have a human mind, a profound shift can take place. Our mind can become entirely illumined, awake, at peace. This is a possibility for us. So we say, may I be free from suffering. This corresponds to the truth of the ending of suffering. May I be free from suffering. Just saying that out loud to and for ourselves. And then finally saying may I grow and develop. So in other words, I can actually grow towards that state of freedom from suffering. So saying to ourself, for ourself, may I grow and develop. And then just sit. Just let go of trying to do this thing or that thing and just sit. Okay, so if you'd like to bring the meditation to a close in your own way. So if you're a newcomer to meditation, what I suggest you do this week is just basically follow what we just did. So there'll be a video and you could just follow the audio and follow that lead through. And just do that first stage of the Metta Bhavana. So you're just sitting with an attitude of well-wishing towards yourself, which really is just even an affirmation of the care and the concern you already have for yourself. You're giving expression to that and just sitting with that. And if you're an experienced practitioner, if you've done more practice and you know this practice already, you might like to take something, maybe a perspective or a little technique into your practice this week, your practice of Metta Bhavana. So I'll just leave that up to you to decide what that's going to be. So you might like to just think about, what am I going to take from what I've heard tonight into my practice this week? Again, if meditation is new to you, what I suggest you do is just sit comfortably. Just one thing is just to try and keep yourself sort of upright. So sitting in an armchair probably won't be ideal, but try and sit in a chair where you're going to be upright. We'll look at meditation posture next week. And it's really, really good if you can get into a habit of meditating at the same time. So the hardest thing is to develop that consistency. And that's really what you're trying to do. If you're trying to develop a new meditation practice, just try and do it at the same time every day. And that will create a momentum that will carry you forward. So I'd really strongly suggest that you make a firm decision about when you're going to do it. And I'd recommend that you try and do it every day. You might like to give yourself a day off, so you don't want to become harsh. At the same time, if you don't do any practice, nothing's going to happen. So you need to find that kind of middle way between being overly harsh and being overly lackadaisical on the other hand. And actually think about when exactly you're going to practice. If you've already got a practice and you're trying to re-establish it, one thing you might like to do is to come along to the morning meditations and the lunchtime meditations, which happen every day on the online Dublin Buddhist Centre. You'll find the links on our website. So that's at 7:30 every morning, and that's including Saturday actually, and Monday to Friday from 1:15 until 1:45. So that'll be an opportunity to participate online in a meditation. And also just to remind you to read the introduction and chapter 1 of the book, which will go in a little bit more depth into some of the things I've just touched on this evening. And if there's something else, there might be one other thing. So that's sort of in a way the core thing is the meditation and the reading. But there might be one other thing that you might like to carry into the week from what you've heard this evening. I'll leave that up to you to decide. But do make a clear decision that you're going to undertake to do something. And next week, what we'll do is we'll talk about how we got on in our breakout rooms. So next week, basically what we're going to be doing is going a little bit more into the ethical foundation of metta. And it's quite pragmatic, it's quite down to earth, the next part of the sutta. And we'll also look at the second stage of the Metta Bhavana, the stage of the good friend. And we're going to be on the same Zoom link. So you might like to, one thing I actually do is I just copy the Zoom link into my Google Calendar, and then you don't have to keep going back into your email all the time. But we will also send you the link as in an email, just the day of the meditation course, so just to make it easy for you to find. And I'll also send you an email tomorrow, which will have the video of this evening's class, and I might include some other things if I think of things that need to be included. I might, for example, include an alternative translation of the Metta Sutta, which is a wee bit more accessible than the one that's in the book. And yeah, just before we finish, there's one question. There's a couple of questions, is there? Let's see. Where will I find the poem you read, please? The poem I read is in the book. The book Living with Kindness. Someone was asking that. And there's a question here. I don't think I've got time to respond to it. Maybe we could chat about it sometime, Tony. Tony's asking about omniscience. Is the Buddha omniscient? Actually, I tell you what, just hang around afterwards, and if anyone's interested in that question that Tony's put in the chat box, I'll try and respond to it after we finish in a minute. And lastly, just to remind you that about the donations. So yeah, just to remind you that we're doing everything on a donation basis at the moment, and we're completely reliant on people's generosity to keep the centre running. Other than that, I'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, and for a further exploration of metta and Metta Bhavana. Okay, so that's it for this evening. See you later.